Hi, everyone. I'm Bruno Aziza, and welcome to this great session on how to win big with data in 2022. I'm very excited to have some amazing speakers with us today. We have Noel from Forrester and Di from WPP. And I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. We're going to do a little something special here by starting with a fun fact. So I'll give you a fun fact about me. As you notice on this slide, my last name reads forward and backwards the same way. It's a palindrome. So, Di, tell us about you and give us your fun fact.
Hi, Bruno. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. So I'm Di Mays. I'm Global Head of Data and AI for WPP. I'm the first ever person to have this role, and WPP is a creative transformation company, has over 100,000 people in it. Here's my fun fact. So I am a qualified neuro-linguistic program practitioner and hypnotherapist. So if I tell you to look into my eyes, don't, because it's going to be a trap.
I'm going to have to remember that during this session. What about you, Noel?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me on this webinar. This is Noel Johanna, analyst with Forrester Research, and I cover more on the data management, data warehouse, data integration space, including cloud initiatives. So what was my fun fact? I would say it's all to do about cooking, right? I obviously cook a lot over the weekends. One of my favorite recipe is rum cake. Obviously, I don't cook it every week, but once a year. And this rum cake is actually very interesting because I put the whole rum bottle into the cake and bake it. But also after it bakes, I put more rum as well. So it's rum cake actually.
That is a great fun fact. And you'll have to tell me what kind of rum you like after this session. But let's get started. From an agenda standpoint, I'm going to start with a little bit of context, and then we'll go into a panel where we'll ask Noel and Di to give us their perspective. And so that's kind of our plan today. And we try to make it as entertaining and educational as we can. Now, of course, listening to us, we expect that we have data leaders who are trying to figure out what it takes to win with data in 2022. And the way we think about it here at Google is, our mission is really to help you get value from your data. Now, we're not going to discuss how much data there is. You're very familiar with the increase in volume, velocity, and issues with data. But the biggest problem that we see our customers dealing with is getting value out of data. Now, if you're feeling like you're not getting value, don't feel bad, because that is a large portion of organizations. 68% of organizations today are struggling with this very problem. Now, why is this happening? There are many reasons I'm sure you'll relate to here on this slide, but they go from maturity to dealing with silos to dealing with complexity. What do we mean by that? When we mean maturity, we of course think about maturity of not just software, but also maturity of teams, being able to train your data analysts to do more data scientist work, to incorporate data engineers into your data value chain, and doing that, of course, at the same time as your architecture and your data stack is evolving. We also know that the data that you're storing today is across multiple silos. Silos because they might be on premise, silos because they might be in the cloud, and sometimes they might be in multiple clouds. And so it creates this complexity of how do you provide a comprehensive view of the data that you can take advantage of. And then finally, the complexity of the environment. What types of formats is this data stored in? Is it a data lake? Is it a data warehouse? Is it a data mart? And so all these things are forcing you to think about how do you optimize to get the most value out of data. Now, when we talk to organizations and how we at Google can help them, many of them tell us this is what they want as the end result: a very clean, simple interface that provides personalization at a very high scale. Now, you know that we've, of course, been working on this for decades for ourselves, because behind this beautiful white page is the complexity of the internet. And the internet is lots of data, lots of disconnected data, and lots of data that's growing and sometimes might not make a lot of sense in isolation. And really, our work has been about providing simplicity in a world that's highly complex, the world of the internet. And this is not dissimilar to the environment that most of you are dealing with. If you're a data leader today, you're probably looking at this map here as a representation of all the options of companies and technologies and startups that you could be investing in today. And so, in 2021, this is what the map looked like. A few years ago, only in 2012, the map looked actually pretty comprehensible. You could see the logos, you could see the categories, but of course, it's now becoming so complex. Then when we ask customers, what does your architecture feel like? This is kind of the image that most people think about. So the question is, how do you get to this as fast as possible? And of course, there's not an easy button you can press to get there. It's going to require quite a few things to think about. The first one is providing the sophistication that is required for you to do your job. We understand, of course, that you want to provide simplicity to your end users, but we don't want to lose the sophistication of the use cases, the sophistication of the questions that you have. So we want to be able to have a stack that takes care of all the personas across the organization, but also takes care of issues around collecting, processing, storing, analyzing, activating, and empowering your people. But while we have this level of complexity and this level of sophistication, we also want to provide a simple interface so all these capabilities can come together. Now, our observation has been that organizations typically go through 3 phases of maturity on their way to getting there. And I'm going to take you through each of them, hoping it provides a mental framework to get your company to this beautiful white page for your company. So the first one is what we call the data ocean. And in the data ocean phase, organizations are trying to have an end-to-end view of their data estate. And their data estate, as I mentioned earlier, might be on-premise, it might be in the cloud, it might be in multiple clouds. So technologies like data catalogs, technologies like multi-cloud or cross-cloud analytics capabilities are important here. Abilities to go from transactional workloads to analytical workloads are also very important. And here the motivation for most customers is to be able to build a system that scales humanly and scales economically. So it's really important to think about this consideration around reducing costs, reducing management headaches as you're moving to a new cloud serverless platform, which is really quite different from an on-prem environment that required a lot of manual intervention, if you will, to provide value and performance for you. Once organizations have kind of created the fundamental, the foundational aspects of their data platforms, what they move to is the need now to create federated environments for their business users. This is the second stage, typically called the data mesh. Now, I'm using these terms that are not, as you can see, created by Google. These are terms that you've heard in the industry. When we think about the data ocean, this is a term that was coined by one of our customers actually 2 years ago. The data mesh is an industry term I'm sure you've read a lot about. And this idea of the data mesh is now that you've been able to kind of quickly and completely see your data and govern your data centrally, you want to federate access to that data, creating analytics hubs, analytics neighborhoods, analytics environments so your business units can self-serve to it and innovate on top of it, and maybe sometimes even contribute back to the central governance system. And so this is where technologies like data fabrics, so intelligent data fabrics are important here. This is where technologies like analytics exchanges are important because you want to make sure that people can easily exchange data, exchange solutions, so they can contribute to innovation across the organization. So that's really for data mesh and really centralized around federation and business value for the various business units. Once you've matured to this stage, organizations typically now move to a third evolution, which we call the data factory. And again, I say we call it, but it really is an industry term that was actually coined by McKinsey. And so what's happening in the data factory is this idea of repeatability of building data solutions. This is when your teams now are able to infuse artificial intelligence. They're able to use frameworks like universal semantic layers to build applications that are data rich, that are intelligent. So this is where you now are able to build solutions like anomaly detection and fraud analytics and predictions and recommendation systems. So now you can get to the next level in a repeatable manner. This idea of factory is that you have a process to go from experimentation to production back to experimentation, so you can quickly kind of iterate and get more value across the organization. There are lots of details around the use cases that you can pick across each of these phases. And I'm providing you this slide in an effort to really help you pick and choose what is the use case you want to prioritize. It's also important that you do understand that your organization might be straddling across these phases. Maybe a business unit is at the ocean phase and another one is at the data factory, and that's totally fine, because in order to get everybody to data factory, you might not be able to do it all at once. And so think about that consideration as you're evolving through this model. Now, of course, we want to make this model real for you. And so Dai, you're a practitioner in the space, and we've talked about a maturity model here. I want to know how it relates to your experience. How did you mature to something like this? Does this make sense?
It does make sense. And I really like some of the language that you've used. I love data factory and data neighborhood. I'm going to be taking that. But I don't necessarily see them as sequential. And at WPP, I think we've got projects in flight that sit in all of those. And just to talk about my team on how we've increased the maturity, we focus on 3 different pillars. And it's to make sure that we make progress and build momentum in every area. So the first one is discovery and curation. What data do we have versus what do we need? And this would be your data ocean, but also a bit the data factory. So we have a connect, not collect philosophy. And we have a catalog where we've listed over 500 data sources. You can put BI tools on top. We're partnering with Google to make sure we've got an automated data tagger so that it's easier to find. And we're obsessing about unstructured data. And that's, again, where our data tagger is coming in so that we can really start to eke every bit of value out of all the data we have. And then secondly, and I know we're going to talk about this later, we've built an academy and we're really focusing on educating and empowering. And then finally, we've got content and communities, and we come up with thought leadership, and we're building communities.
And how did you prioritize your use cases?
It's a really challenging one, because a lot of the proper meaty big builds or replatforming or consolidating, they do take time. So we make sure we've got a blend of short-term quick wins and then some longer-term projects in order to deliver value. But around our communities and around the catalog, we just make sure we surface stories. So, for example, one of our agencies had used some Google Trends data, and we blended it with weather data, and they did some brilliantly creative digital marketing around those 2 data sets blended. So we surfaced that as a data story. We talked to them in our community. We shared the data via the catalog. So making sure we've got a complete loop. And they're the short-term ones that we prioritize, but we've got longer-term goals going on as well.
That's outstanding. And we're going to double click under those use cases and also the community. But before we do that, I want to go to Noel to talk about the trends for this year. And I'd love to hear your perspective on what are maybe the top 2 or 3 that we need to really look out for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting is that if you look at it from the perspective of the data usage, first of all, we see about 85% of organizations want to improve their data insights in decision making, right? It's not surprising. Like a lot of folks want to improve their decision making. But 91%, on the other hand, report that improving the use of data insights in decision making is challenging. It's not straightforward, right? And in fact, less than half of the decisions are made on based on quantitative information rather than qualitative information, right? So this is a big challenge. I think from the organization perspective, we see a lot of organizations struggle from a data perspective. They aren't able to make the decisions quicker and faster and in more real time in a self-service manner. So it's definitely a big challenge. If you look at the top trends we see today in organizations, certainly there's cloud, right? Cloud is a big one. There's AI machine learning, there's connected data, there's real-time data scenario, there's self-service part of it as well. So these are the 5 areas we see. Cloud obviously is a big one, because obviously we see a lot of migrations happening to the cloud and also multi-cloud as well, right? But also the fact that they are trying to move not only some existing platforms, but also create some of these newer generation of mobile applications and edge applications and some of these IoT applications as well, right? And then machine learning, AI is obviously a big factor. I think most organizations are starting to experiment and incorporate AI machine learning into their platforms to drive better customer success, customer experiences, better value from different types of data analysis they have, so that they can provide better revenue and growth. But also connected data, right? Connected data is very important because we got tons and tons of data coming in, which is structured and unstructured and semi-structured data coming in. How do you blend in? How do you integrate those, right? Especially in real time, becomes a very, very challenging thing as well. And I think organizations are starting to realize that if you want to do the big focus area for analytics, you have to spend time on connecting data as well. And the more automation we drive from connections, the better, right? Instead of manually trying to connect the dots together, which can take a lot of time, and real time aspects as well. Because real time obviously drives better results, faster results. Imagine getting your reports, which is very old and certainly which is not up to the latest, greatest scenario. People want all these reports and dashboards in seconds as opposed to days or weeks, right? And self-service, I think, is a very important trend where we see organizations self-service improving the automation from IT processes, but also from a self-service, from a business perspective, to really improve the outcomes and make those dashboards in a more self-service manner for the business analysts and business users to drive results quicker and faster as well. Instead of relying on IT organizations to help them, they want to themselves create those dashboards as well, right? So this is some of the things we see as a top trend. From a cloud perspective, we see that cloud powers this new connected economy, right? It's obviously got all of these things. In fact, these digital business create connected cloud systems with their customers at the center, right? So if you look at this picture, you'll see that the customer is at the center, and all these connection points are critical, whether you're looking at clickstream data, logstream data coming in, you got master data coming in. You really need to connect the dots. And cloud is a perfect example of having a platform that can drive those results quicker and faster, especially when you're doing customer 360, customer intelligence, driving better business success,
That's outstanding. I mean, connecting the dots, I think is a big part of how you get value from data. So, one thing that we often don't talk enough about, we're here talking about technology and trends and so forth, is the people aspect. Often we say that the hard stuff is the soft stuff. And so data culture is a big topic of conversation. So, Dai, how did you, coming into the company, how did you manage to build a strong data culture here? Do you have, do's and don'ts you can share with us so we can learn from you?
I think making it about the people. I mean, you can buy whatever data you need, the tech's available. So I think empowering the people. And I often say the chief data officer role is quite a lonely role because people don't tend to move from chief data officer up to CEO. They move to another chief data officer role. And they often report to people who've never done the role. The breadth of the role that you're expected to have as a chief data officer, from knowing the tech, the data practices, the stats, the laws, the ethics. So I've made a really inclusive and fun chief data officer group, which we call the Sea Dogs. And that's for data practitioners and senior people. And the whole agenda is sharing is caring. It's all WPP content. The next thing we've done, which we're really proud of, is we built a data and AI community, and it's got 3,000 members. And we talk about, it's not diversity, then inclusivity. It's inclusivity, then you get diversity. Everyone is welcome to join the WPP data and AI community, but all the conversation is data and AI. And we have different levels. So we've done history of AI, introduction to AI, what the developer does versus a data scientist. We have guest speakers. We have an illustrator who comes to every single one of the webinars. So we've got a really brilliant collection of illustrations that summarize everything. So really try and bring the stories to life. And then we launched an academy this last year where we've got a KPI to deep skill 5,000 data practitioners, to upskill 50,000 of my colleagues, which we've launched a Demystify AI program. So those two KPIs, we've done a lot of data literacy and training. And we won an award earlier this year, which we were really, really proud of. Data IQ gave us an award for Best Data Literacy Program. And we've had some real fun bringing training to life. And it's a mixture of a 9-month program for our partnership with Oxford to 2-minute videos. So bringing it to life, making it engaging for everybody. And not everyone will be on the journey from the beginning, and that's fine. Just take everyone and you'll get momentum, and then people want to be part of it.
Well, first of all, congratulations on your award. That's really quite amazing. I think every company I work with is asking me about best practices for data literacy programs. And I love your approach of upskilling and deep skilling. And then is it Sea Dogs? What's the name of the community?
Dogs, yes. The Chief
That's quite
Data
amazing.
Officer
So you
Group.
made it catchy as well, which is quite amazing. And I hope that people are going to reach out to you if they, of course, have questions and suggestions. We've got a lot to learn from the work you've done. So congratulations on that. Now, of course, a lot of this is also coupled with great technology choices. And Noelle, I would like to bring you back here to help the audience think about what are the criteria, what are the top learnings that you have gathered working with organizations across the world when they choose a data cloud warehouse solution. What are some of the key things they need to pay attention to? And of course, some of them you have documented in your research today.
Yeah, absolutely. So this year we did the Forrester Wave on cloud data warehouse. And a data warehouse obviously is a complex kind of a platform, right? You can't just have a few criterias. So for this, we really had about 26 criterias, which really provided the whole framework. And what is interesting is that in this data warehouse analysis we did, we looked at current offering, we looked at strategy, we looked at market presence. And from a current offering perspective, we looked at obviously the different types of data integration with lakes. We looked at administration. We looked at data processing. We looked at HADR, performance, scalability, security. I mean, all of these are critical actually components of really a cloud data warehouse. It's not just a few of them, but quite a few of them. But the more important is also the strategy. Like, what is the vision of these solutions out there, right? What is the vision? What's the roadmap looks like? What kind of support does it exist with? But also the market presence as well, right? Market presence is important. Like, how much customers do they have? What kind of revenue do they have? What kind of awareness they have as well from a product perspective? So definitely we looked at many of these components together to drive how do we really pick and choose who are the leaders in this cloud data warehouse wave. So if you look at it from a wave perspective, we saw the whole notion of having this graphic which shows you the different types of leaders out there, but also strong performers and contenders as well. So these are the 13 top of the vendors who we did this evaluation on those criteria, as I mentioned, and this is the positions of those vendors. So if you look at the key learnings, what is interesting is that the cloud data warehouse has expanded to support any use case. Now, traditionally, it was only focusing on BI, actually, right? But now we see that cloud data warehouse is being deployed for many, many different use cases. I'll talk more about it later on. But what is interesting is that the scale has gone into hundreds of terabytes into petabytes, which is very interesting. So people can deploy these cloud data warehouses into petabytes of scale, which is very interesting. But also they have a lot of advanced capabilities like AI machine learning. There's geospatial support there, but there's also analytical support and also self-service. We also see a high degree of automation, right, to really simplify deployments, and obviously integration with data lakes is there. So what's interesting is that the cloud data warehouse has been evolving over the last few years, and we are seeing a lot of more value proposition for cloud data warehouses today than what it was maybe a few years ago. And they continue to evolve. They continue to innovate. We're not done yet with the cloud data warehouses. As I mentioned, we're going to see a lot more in terms of automation and AI machine learning support, and also the fact that more self-service driven enablement as well. From a use case perspective, we definitely see many different use cases which go beyond BI. Things like customer intelligence, real-time analytics, IoT, data science, data collaboration, data services, you name it. So, as I mentioned, traditionally we have seen only BI deployments being as the top use cases for cloud data warehouses. But the expansion has been large enough for many different scenarios to be deployed. In fact, customers are deploying many different data warehouses for different use cases, as I mentioned. And I think the ones which are very interesting is like data collaboration. You can collaborate data amongst the line of businesses within an organization, and also having these different data services deployments as well, so that you can do real-time insights, real-time operational insights, and what have you.
Well, thanks for sharing those learnings with us. I think today we talked about both the technology and the process and people aspect of winning with data. We talked about literacy and culture. And again, Dai's got some great best practices, and you've got already recognition from the industry on what you've done. I think it's amazing the work you've done with building community. And I hope people reach out to you to learn how you've created these amazing communities of teams to be able to connect before collecting. On the technology side, I think we learned from Noel that there are many criteria that you have to look at before you can make the right decision. You listed 26 of them across the offering of a vendor, the strategy, and also their presence. You talked about the trends on scale, both against scale of data, but also the breadth required to be able to do data warehousing and data lakes and transactional and analytical at the same time. And of course, the role that automation plays here in 2022, now in the year where we really have the opportunity to take data to the next level. Now, there are lots of places that you could go to in order to learn more, but I'm going to give you one site here, cloud.google.com/data-cloud. That's where we have all resources. You also get access to the Forrester report if you want to share it with your team. Dai, Noel, I want to thank you for the time today. Until next time, I'm Bruno Ziza.